Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special episode of the Pretty Good Podcast. A very special episode, the Urban Legends episode. Also known as Pretty Good Podcast 14. Joining me today on this cryptic journey is Craig Taylor, Master of the Dark, and Sensei of the Ethereal Plane, Matt Davis, and also controlling the heavenly lights is Brendan.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Hell yeah.
So this is a pretty special episode. We did tease last time that we would be doing the Urban Legends episode, so let's see how this goes.
Also, leader of the Autobots, Optimus Prime, joining us.
The Decepticons are evil.
On his little plaque up there, not to ruin the mood, but on his little plaque up there, it has a quote and it says, "Freedom is the right of all sentient beings." Thank you, Optimus.
We have some stories and stuff we'll cover, but we're going to kick off with the Urban Legends.
Yeah, this is our cryptid episode.
It is. I've been excited for this.
We talked about this like a couple months ago, I think, and but I am really excited for it. It's pretty cool.
Without further ado, I'm going to take the first urban legend. And, you know, on this channel, we're gamers. We wear the Walmart gamer shirts.
Yeah,
Sure. So this first story is actually about a game. So, back in 1981, there was an arcade game that started showing up around Portland, Oregon. The name of this arcade game was Polybus. Like any new game, it instantly got attention and kids started playing it. The only thing is, this game was very addicting. What exactly the gameplay is like, nobody is actually sure. What they are sure about is it supposedly produced intense psychoactive and addictive effects in the player. In fact, it became so bad, players would be playing the game and experience symptoms of amnesia, forgetting who they were and what they were doing.
Sounds like me playing Power Wash.
All they wanted was to play Polybus. Players would also suffer side effects, including seizures, amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, and hallucinations, all from an arcade game. Just to add even more mystery, these machines were serviced by men wearing all black. They would come in, check data off these machines, and they would disappear without a trace in unmarked vehicles. Approximately 1 month after this game first appeared in arcades, it disappeared without a trace. If you look online, there are pictures of the Polybus arcade cabinet that people claim to have seen. Many people account remembering playing this as a child, even perhaps with the Mandela effect, getting it confused with a different game, but many people swear that they have played this game. And no one can particularly describe what the gameplay was like, but they have a distinct memory in their head of just what it was, but they can't describe it. Does it exist? Who knows? But many people claim that it did, and some people still suffer some psychological effects from it.
Wow.
So there was actually, if you do Google it, there was a game. There was pictures of this arcade cabinet, but there was also a version released in 2007 for the PC, which is a 2D shooter. That is not the real game. There was also a game released in 2017 inspired by this tale that you can play on the PlayStation and VR. No seizures or amnesia. But it is VR compatible. So, apparently this arcade machine existed in the 80s. Was it really there or not? So many people, I feel like there's so many things that like people claim to have existed, but did they actually exist? There's like supposedly like all the pictures of this thing are faked and no one knows. And who were these black men? Some people suspect it was like a project of the CIA and could potentially be declassified one day. Some people claim it doesn't exist at all. So what would you boys do if you played Polybus?
That's terrifying.
I feel like Aaron Rodgers would have his hands on it by now. It existed as part of his trip.
It's interesting to think about, you know, obviously being an urban legend, but
It sounds fake until you put like was it a CIA data collecting project or something? Because some of the stuff that gets declassified over the years is just like, they did that?
Well, that's what I'm trying to think of, is putting myself in the mind frame like this happened, like this is real, and trying to think that, because that's where the fun comes from, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how does this creature exist? What would be the CIA, assuming that's like the men in the black suits, right? Some government entity. What was the purpose of them putting out like an arcade game like that?
What if the intended purpose of this arcade game was to cause that amnesia and, you know, night terrors and kind of get into people's minds?
Yeah.
Could this have been a weaponized thing that, say we're at war with another country, we ship this arcade game over there unsuspecting and start messing with people?
I'll say this: if the exploding cigar is real, which I don't think it is, this could also be just as effective.
Yeah. Well, you know, you read about like MK Ultra and them experimenting with drugs and trying to psychologically break people and sort of what's the word? Mind control them. And
You just reminded me of something I want to talk
you know,
about.
even if the arcade game is not getting dropped into the Soviet Union or whatever, maybe it's just part of researching, you know, what can break down a human psyche like this? How much damage can we do with a certain type of experiment, you know?
Now, video game technology, there's even like seizure warnings and stuff at the beginning of movies and games and stuff. So, I mean, it's very realistic that it could purposely be a game could be purposely manufactured to cause like psychological effects and seizures in children. But then the game disappearing, was it a secret recall? Was it the CIA? Was it the KGB back in the 80s?
If it was like really addictive and made money, I think there's zero chance that it would not have been replicated.
And if it was recalled, you figured there would be records of that. Like, a
newspaper.
This gaming company, like we put out that game.
There was a gaming company and it was listed under a German name, which I do not know. But it was like...
like Operation Paperclip type of situation.
That's interesting.
But there was an actual game company associated with this supposed arcade.
It's a Nazi scientist arcade game. It's fucked up.
I mean, there's been some shit, but I figured it's a nice little quick story to get us in the mood here.
And it's weird. I guess a cryptid doesn't have to be a monster that eats you.
No,
but the rest of mine pretty much are. Anyone want to take a turn on a story here?
I can go next, I guess. I kept it, I don't want to say vanilla, but a few classics. So I'm going to start with the Loch Ness Monster, the OG.
Yeah, I just want to say, Craig, I wouldn't call it vanilla. You know, if you're listening to Biggie or Tupac, it's not vanilla. It's just original. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
Loch Ness Monster, I think it's fitting that we kind of start there before any other monsters necessarily.
Right. So I think my first encounter with Loch Ness Monster is there was like a library book with that famous picture on it. And as a kid, I'm like, I am looking at a real dinosaur. Like that was my...
Yeah.
Is that real blurry one that like, no matter how much you squint at it, it's still blurry?
Yeah.
Like our footage. So that picture obviously is like probably the most famous cryptid picture ever. Like it's so iconic in such a weird way. So the legend grew from how many people visit Loch Ness, since Loch Ness is the biggest body of water in the UK apparently. So a lot of visitors means a lot of sightings. And the legend was originally started locally, but then it grew to, you know, I guess fame during the 20th century because, you know, more people visited and what have you. It's often depicted as a plesiosaur. I don't know exactly what type of dinosaur that is, but you can probably imagine it just by
it's the one that looks like the Loch Ness Monster.
Has a long neck and flippers, like 4 flippers.
Like in, I think in Ape Escape or Mario 64 has a plesiosaur.
I wonder if they have a little Nessie dinosaur in a Jurassic Park movie. Lucas would know.
It's like in video games a lot, weirdly. But so that's how it's depicted.
He looks exactly like him. Look at that.
Yeah. So as for where it comes from, haters are going to tell you that the Loch couldn't sustain a creature that size or like a herd, that unless it's invincible, it would have to like reproduce. So it would have to be a herd of them, and there's no food supply there that could sustain something of that size for hundreds of years. And also that the lake was formed after the last ice age, which was about 10,000 years ago, which I'm pretty sure was post Plesiosaur time period. Am I correct, Brendan? Yeah, I would think so.
It's over 65 million years.
Yeah, so little late on that. But you know, some people suspect that if people aren't seeing like debris or hoaxes or just like land animals, that it could be either a large catfish, which there's apparently a large catfish that's native to Loch Ness, or it could be a sturgeon, which you'll know what a sturgeon is if you've played Animal Crossing. So, of Animal Crossing fame. But yeah, so that's kind of Loch Ness Monster. Some quick facts about it, and you gotta pay respect to the classics. It's like the Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Of
Did
cryptids.
you research that picture, that famous photo at all?
Well, sort of. So apparently, that photo people say was like the people suspect it was a submarine toy that had like a lot of clay or just some other type of material on it.
Because that's what I heard, that photo, it took a really long time for them to debunk it, like why it's so famous.
I was
but
convinced when I was a kid that the Loch Ness Monster was like 100% real. And they used to do on like the Discovery Channel, like discovering Lake Loch Ness. And
they probably do that for all these. Like,
yeah, I'm sure.
History Channel.
I guess to me, you know, because we're coming at these cryptids. I think about some of these smaller guys. Like you think about the classic Bigfoot, like Bigfoot's roaming around Northern California. And, you know, I automatically think like, how come nobody has found a Bigfoot? How come no one's taken like a good photo of a Bigfoot? And I remember watching this Bigfoot documentary, and they did an aerial shot of like the woodlands of Northern California. And it's like
massive.
You know, like planes crash there and nobody ever finds them. And I'm not saying Bigfoot's real, obviously, but like I'm saying something like that could exist in those woods, and there is a chance that nobody like finds that. Nobody's taking a picture of it, nobody sees it, because like if you're hiking through there, maybe you don't run into it. And if you're hiking through there, why are you there? You know, it's mostly like I think weed farmers that like live up in there or stuff like that. You know, in the woods itself. So when I think of Loch Ness Monster, though, I think when you hear about these big ones, like the Snallygaster is another one where it's like, oh, it's a 20 feet long bird that can hold a man in its hands. And it's like, all right, how the hell has this not been found, though? You know, how has like a 15-year-old not put this thing on TikTok yet, right?
Because no one gave him tree fit yet.
Yeah. And you know, obviously there's explanations people would throw out there that, you know, there's a portal at the bottom of the Loch Ness, you know, lake or whatever that Nessie swims in and out of or something. There's explanations you can come up with, but I always kind of think along those lines. It is really fun to believe as a kid, though, because he is like a dinosaur. He or she is like a dinosaur. And so it's like, it is cool to think about, what if there was like a dinosaur still hanging around? You know, I know they say like alligators and crocodiles are descendants of dinosaurs or whatever, but it's like, what if there was one just hanging around in a lake in Scotland, and we
just haven't found him.
He or she's just been chilling there for like 10,000 years. King Arthur rode up to that thing, and Nessie popped out, and he was like, all right, I'm riding back down to Wales, you know?
Yeah. So,
all right. Well, I can get into one that I had never heard of until very recently.
Ooh.
I heard about the Enfield Monster.
What's your rating on this one? Vanilla? Gore?
I would say it's a deep cut. And I wouldn't say it's frightening so much as it is really fascinating, because the Enfield Monster is not a phenomenon that has carried on over the years like a Nessie or a Bigfoot. The Enfield Monster, oftentimes it's referred to as like the Enfield Haunting, because it's a period of time. It's a small window of like a few weeks where people kept seeing this thing show up.
what is Enfield? Is it like a region?
Is this Britain?
No,
Okay, because that is
no.
a separate. There is
This
the
is-
Enfield haunting of Britain.
Okay, so it's not that Enfield haunting.
That's the Conjuring.
Yeah, it's not that Enfield haunting. This is the Enfield Monster. This is referring to Enfield, Illinois. Okay, I'm sorry.
Closer to home.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna say Enfield haunting, and that's obviously probably the more popular Enfield haunting. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the Enfield Monster. So, let me get into it. It's a small town in Illinois, and in 1973, April 25th,
Spooky
1973,
year.
a man. All right, I was respectful during.
No, I'm serious. That is like if you start a story with in 1973,
That's like
Yeah.
the era of serial
It is, yeah,
killers.
some fucked
and-
up shit happened.
I feel like that time frame brings you back to like Freddy and Jason and the Halloween movies, like when all those classic horror movies
Well,
were coming
like
out
the 70s
too.
and like 80s to me is like, Ted Bundy,
Texas
John Wayne
Chainsaw
Gacy,
Yeah.
Ed Gein, like the big serial killers, like all active during like 70s and 80s. That was like when people were unchecked and, hitchhikers, they'd end up missing in the morning.
I think
Yeah.
that game was like the 40s, if not mistaken.
Well, and it is
I
interesting
don't
because
remember off the top of my
this-
The vibe, yeah.
I'm going to get into it. This event is interesting because you can see how did this happen for like a week or something, and maybe nobody did catch a picture of this thing, and it's vanished like to history. So the story originally starts with this guy. Okay, his name is Henry Mcdaniel. April 25th, 1973. He comes home. Okay, parks. It's dark outside. Parks his car. It was 10 p.m. exactly. He was getting home from like a late shift at work. He goes inside, and his kids, he has a son and a daughter, and they're like making a ruckus, like something spooked them. And he starts cracking up. He's like, "What's wrong with you guys?" And they're like, "Something's outside, like something just messed up the air conditioner or whatever." And he looked over, and the air conditioner's all fucked up and lopsided, like something was pushing it in, like a window unit. And of course, my first thought was like, those kids pushed that air, it was a monster that did it. But he thought it was funny, and so he decided, well, let me go out and check it, because this was a few minutes ago. So this thing was outside with him. Like when he pulled up and got out of his car, this thing was sitting outside. So he looks out the front window. He thinks he sees something. So he goes and he opens the door, and what he sees, he describes as a creature with red glowing eyes. It has 3 legs. Okay, so like 2 up front and 1 in the back. It's about yay high, like half the height of a man or something like that, I think is how he described it. And let me read his exact quotes. It had 3 legs on it, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall and was grayish colored, and it had an almost human-like body. So he sees this thing, and he goes, this is rural America, so he goes and gets a gun, 22 caliber pistol, steps outside. It comes up onto his porch, and he takes a shot at it, and he claims he hit it. He aimed and he hit this thing, and that it bounded away, and that it was able to cover like 17 feet in one single bound. He calls the police. Police come to his house, and the police write in their report that Mr. McDaniel appeared sober, and that he was speaking non-hysterically, like he was delivering this story very sober and clear. And what's this guy's reputation around town? He's a single father. Neighbors describe him as a hardworking guy, salt of the earth. Not like the town loony, not a guy that's ever like lying or anything like that. So it starts to give credence to the story. So people start to get interested, and it gets reported in a newspaper. So all these reporters come in from out of town, and they come to this small little town, and they're looking for the Enfield Monster, right? scientists have a theory that it was a kangaroo. What he saw must have been a kangaroo that escaped from a zoo, or somebody had an exotic pet that was a kangaroo. And it does make sense at first when you think about something that has like a human-like body, 3 legs being
Covered 17 feet.
the 2 legs and a tail, and that it hops. I also want to mention that the police, when they were at his house, found footprints, and they described it as dog-like tracks, but instead of 5 pads, because a dog has 1, 2, 3, 4 3, 4, 5 pads total, this thing had 6 pads per footprint, and that it did have an odd gait, as though it had 3 legs, like 2 in the front and 1 in the back. This is on the police report. So we have a pretty credible witness, and we have a police report corroborating this with some evidence, right? Although they searched the perimeter and they didn't find anything. They didn't find any blood or like a body or anything. But you can see how like a kangaroo is an interesting explanation. Well, I'm about to hit you guys with a serious fucking curveball. Henry Mcdaniel responds to the kangaroo theory. And he says he served in the army. And while he was in the army, he was stationed in Australia. And at their base, they had multiple kangaroos that were friendly animals on the base. So he had a lot of like up close, intimate interactions with kangaroos. And he said it was not a kangaroo. I have spent a lot of time around them, like up close, and this was not one. So that's kind of interesting, right? I mean, so it goes further. There is a funny part of the story, but I'll read it to you chronologically here. So reporters come in from out of town, and they start interviewing nearby residents to Henry to see if any of them spotted something. And they interview a 10-year-old boy named Greg Garrett, who claims to have encountered the monster that same night that Henry Mcdaniel did, and that it stepped on his shoes and ruined his shoes.
Did he need new shoes at the time?
Later, it came out, like a few years later, he called Western Illinois University and confessed to having lied to the news reporter just to basically fuck with an out-of-towner, essentially. Which, kudos to that 10-year-old kid. That is funny. Like, yeah, I saw him, you know. But what goes on is the radio station WWKI, okay, they get a phone call on May 6th. So remember, the first sighting was April 25th. They get a phone call on May 6th. Someone claims to have seen the creature at 3 a.m. and that it was negotiating the trestles of a railroad track near McDaniel's home. So the WWKI assembles a team, including
The WWE is
the WWE. It's Ric Flair,
Shawn Michaels.
Ric Flair, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels,
Triple A.
John Cena's out there.
President, I don't know, Obama's like, we're building a team.
So WWKI, the news company that gets the call, they go out with a search party that's led by their news director, a guy named Rick Rainbow, which is just kind of perfect for the story, right?
It sounds WWE.
There's so many cool little elements to this story, like a little kid lying about it, this guy Henry Mcdaniel having served in Australia with kangaroos, like a guy named Rick Rainbow. So this team goes down there, and they're there to just film some footage. They don't expect to see anything. So they claim to have been waiting for a certain lighting of the day to get like spooky footage. So they don't have the cameras rolling. But Rick Rainbow reported observing an ape-like creature standing near an abandoned building near McDaniel's home. And they claim to have recorded the creature. And the recording, they described it as like a baby screaming and like a mother laughing or something like that. So 2 very like skin crawling noises, right? Like you're hearing this from out in the dark, just like, you know, an infant crying and a mother going, hee hee hee, you know. And unfortunately that, you know, or maybe purposely, that recording has never made it onto the internet. So nobody has it. Nobody can hear it. It's just claimed to have existed.
That we know.
Now, the last sighting was 2 days later. So this is May 7th. Original sighting, April 25th. This would be May 8th.
All the same year.
Yes, this would be May 8th. So 2 days later after the Rick Rainbow sighting. Police get called because there's shots being fired out in the woods near McDaniel's home. The police come and they find a group of men who are all armed with shotguns and rifles. And the police found them to have...
This is like a South Park episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were going out and they were trying to find the Enfield Monster. Because, of course, these are the 3 most prominent sightings. You know, they claim to have sighted it, but police in that report say that these guys were out drinking and raising hell. That's a quote. And they all got charged with hunting violations. But all over town, of course, people are seeing the Enfield Monster everywhere because it's a national story. And there's never been a report since then. Like, not a notable or credible one. And Henry Mcdaniel is not like, he's never done any interviews. He doesn't he's nowhere. I don't even know if he's still alive. The only follow-up news we heard was from Greg Garrett, who was the 10-year-old boy who called and said, yeah, I lied about that. So at the end of the day, we have a news director and his team claiming to have recorded and observed an ape-like creature making a noise, which has to be a different creature. It doesn't seem like it could be the same one as the one that Henry Mcdaniel saw. So in my mind, what's the most interesting is, what the fuck did Henry Mcdaniel see? Because was it a deer with 3 legs? He gives such a vivid description. This thing was right up next to him. So is he lying? Right? But he doesn't have the character of somebody who's lying, and he's not on the news. Like, he doesn't chase fame after this happens. Maybe.
You know what's
Well, hold on. Before you give your theories, I have a couple more things to say. My guinea pigs are fighting in there. Calm down. Sorry.
Who's that in the hallway?
Oh, God. It's the Enfield Monster.
Pittsburgh Monster.
We have Optimus Prime protecting us. What did Henry McDaniel see? Because he doesn't fit the profile of like a lying, oh, I was drunk and I saw the Mothman take my dog or whatever, right? He seems to be, like, by all accounts, a normal, regular citizen, and he just reported seeing this thing and taking a shot at it. And the Kangaroo Theory I thought was really interesting because when I read all the stuff, I was like, well, it's got to be a kangaroo. And then McDaniels pulls out this wild story, like, well, I was in Australia and I served with kangaroos and this wasn't a kangaroo. And it's like, well, what the fuck? Either that is a lie or we can cross kangaroo right off the list. So I'll say what conclusion the academics came to, okay? It was used as a case study for a paper on social contagion in 1978. And sociologists cite the episode as an example of collective behavior and mass hysteria. So it's this idea that when, this news story is going around, everybody's going to start seeing the Enfield Monster, right? And so everybody's out looking for it. Everybody's trying to find it. News reporters are coming in from out of town looking for it, and everybody wants to be the guy that spotted it. And we'll never know. Like, maybe it was running around the town at that time. Maybe it was somebody's. I've seen theories that it's an escaped orangutan from a zoo or something. There was one guy who came out years later and said that he had an exotic pet kangaroo and that it escaped his house around that time. But who knows? There's no
really
clear evidence. And so at the end of the day, what really gets to me, I don't know about any of this other evidence. Like, what did Rick Rainbow see? What the fuck did he see down by the railroad tracks, and what did he record? What did Henry McDaniel see at his house? Did he just make that shit up? Did he hear something on the radio and like when he walked outside, you know how your eyes will just see something sometimes if you're thinking
That's the
about
thing.
it?
The initial count is usually the one you go off of, because once everyone hears word that there is something, the human mind is very complex.
They'll
and
bend
freaky.
it to see
Yes,
something.
They say the mind bends and twists to deal with the horrors of everyday life. Sometimes it bends so much it snaps. That's from Twisted Metal.
I was about to say, I feel like you're quoting a video game.
But
it
like
is
in reality,
true.
if like say we're going to an abandoned house tonight, and I say there is a killer in this house, I keep telling you guys that.
You'll
The
look for
odds
it.
are you're going to see a killer in that house, even though there might not actually be one there, but your mind is going to perceive that there is a killer in this house. So you're going, is there anything, the humanoid figure is what gets me about this story, because is there anything more terrifying than a humanoid figure in the dark that like in the corner of your room or something, or that you see outside your window, especially when you're alone? I mean, that it like makes your skin like crawl.
You're giving me goosebumps right now talking about it.
Just a dark human, like everyone's had that time where they woke up in a bed and you could swear there's like a human figure standing in the corner of your room.
And it sometimes the most terrifying thing for me to think about is just that not that it's a burglar, not that it's anybody there with any purpose. It's just a guy standing there staring at you, right? And because it's like, what the fuck is that? And so I am so interested what the fuck this man saw. What did he see?
Two
and
things.
Also, some cryptozoologists, last thing I want to add, Greg Garrett did call and say he was pranking a reporter. Some people suggest Garrett made that call. He was a little kid. He was either like 10 or 11 at this time. His mom was right there. And so some people suggest that his mom made him make that call to get the news reporters off of to get the news reporters away from them. In my mind, I'm kind of scrapping. I wanted to tell you guys the full story. I'm kind of scrapping all the other stories. I don't know about any of this. Maybe the news reporter guy's making shit up. It's like you said, once people are looking for something, they'll see something.
Yeah, they can see it.
What did this man see? And I just thought it was so interesting because it was just this period of like, what, April 25th to May 8th. And that's it. It was like an incident that happened. And there's been a few university studies on it since then, but like nothing. It's not a recurring monster. They don't have a statue of the Enfield Monster in the middle of their town. Like the next monster I'm going to talk about is the Moth Man. It's way different. But the Enfield Monster, like, what is this guy?
Stuff like that reminds me. Did you ever hear the tale? This is just going to be a little quick one. That supposedly when you're in your house, if you see a hearse pull up outside your house, it used to be like a real urban or like a rural myth kind of. If you saw a hearse pull up outside your house, men would get out of it dark shadows and they would stare up at your window every night, and that was a symbol that you were going to die soon.
Interesting.
It puts that image in my head too.
Yeah. And what did he see? Because you have to start going in all these crazy directions. Like, obviously, a lot of people think that this was an alien, right? Or a creature from another dimension. Obviously, we can't possibly know that. In my mind, I'm like, if you've ever been in the woods at night, you see things sometimes.
Oh, yeah, you're going to convince yourself.
Every sound you hear is like, what was that, right? What did he see on his front porch? What he shot at it. He shot the thing. There was tracks that the police wrote about.
Humans have that fear in the woods too, as almost an evolutionary thing, because statistically, throughout history,
and you
people
can be
camping in the woods even got eaten by predators.
And
killed by things
what
in the
he's
woods.
describing is not like an existing thing. Like he made up a creature. Like,
so I have a couple things to say about this. One, I'm curious that there was no blood analysis, because obviously if he shot it and hit it, there would be something, and that would be, I mean, I don't know if they had strong DNA testing back then, but
Well, I don't think they found any blood was the thing.
and,
So
I mean, if he actually shot something, there would have to be.
keep in mind it was a 22 caliber. Now, obviously, a bullet is a bullet; it's going to do damage, but it is possible, like, it created a small enough wound in a big creature that if it hopped away quick enough, it's not leaving like a big blood trail or anything.
Well, so this is something that I think I actually saw this video.
I'm not trying to convince you that it's real.
No, I know,
Obviously,
I
I
know.
don't know, right?
This, I think, I'll send you the link to this, Lucas. And I think this is actually a strong contender for what this thing might be. So audio isn't really necessary. Look at this. So it's some dude looking at deer in the woods.
Ooh. Oh my god.
And then,
Fucking freaky as shit.
yeah. So obviously, like,
Yes.
so that's a little bit freaky. Now,
That was the other thing I thought of was a deer that has 3 legs, maybe. Like it lost a
Well-
leg or it was born without one, because deer, I was watching a video, and I'll credit the guy here, but he had a really good video about this, and he did the math. You know, I'm sure researchers did it. Him claiming it could jump like 17 feet at a time. Kangaroos and domestic deer in the United States can clear like 25 feet in a single horizontal jump. So it could be something
with,
like
with
that.
this deer. So apparently in the comments, what's possible for like this deer is that it was hit by a car and then healed, kind of fucked up, or was injured.
Yeah.
The other thing is, this is apparently something that does happen to deer naturally. It's some sort of disease. It's not necessarily life-threatening, but their neck will just be fucked up and they'll look weird. Obviously, there's other conflicting things with that,
And-
where like he was standing on 2 legs, but that shows that like it could be a normal animal that just got really fucked up along.
Yeah. And the pink eyes, again, we'll get into my next guy, the Moth Man, but there is an explanation for why a lot of these monsters have pink eyes, and it's because when you see something at nighttime, there's a lot of animals
Reflection,
where when
yeah.
the light refracts, it gives you like the pink part of the retina. So there's a lot of pictures of owls, especially. I know my guinea pigs in there, their eyes, you're supposed to refract red light to you, and if they're refracting white, it means they have like an eye infection or something. But I'm sure deer do that. I don't know. I didn't research that, but maybe they do that, and maybe it was in the porch light or whatever light is coming from the house. It's refracting like pink eyes. at
Growing
this
up
guy.
next to a farm, deer eyes, I don't know necessarily pink, but they do refract light.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought this was like a niche thing. The fact that it's not a huge monster and that it hasn't been a legend, I had never heard of it. I thought it was a really interesting story because it's like I feel like my inclination is that he's telling the truth. He did see something, and I just want to know, like, what the fuck did he see? Like, was it a fucked up deer? Was it some guy had a kangaroo and that it's out hopping around? Like, what did he see that night that seemed to have vanished? I don't think anybody else saw it, because everything after that sort of has an explanation. You got a drunk group of guys going out looking for the monster. You got a little kid lying about it. You got a news director, and I don't want to say that the media lies, but they're certainly looking for a story, right? Especially this local like news thing, like, oh, we saw an ape-like creature and we recorded a sound, but nobody has that sound available. I'm not saying Rick Rainbow lied, but I'm saying that description does not match what the Enfield Monster was originally described as. So what was it? Very curious. Mystery of history.
I guess we will never know.
Exactly.
I want you all to sleep a little less soundly tonight.
God
So-
damn it.
I'm going to tell you a story called The Licked Hand. So- There is a 16-year-old girl, lives in kind of like a suburban like housing plan. Her parents are going to go out for the night, and they're probably going to end up drinking. So they're going to end up staying somewhere overnight. She just turned 16, and they decided that she is old enough to stay on her own. They don't have to worry about her. That's all fine. So to pass some time, what do? She goes down, turns on the TV, just happens to be playing the local news at the time. Well, In a nearby county, there was a convicted killer that had recently broken out of jail, as they tend to do. And, it's still like a county over, so nothing too much to worry about. But, everyone kind of gets that little thought in the back of their head. So she decides she's better off that if she locks her door, locks all the windows, then everything will be fine for the night. So when she peers out into the darkness, there's nothing. It's blank. But sometimes that emptiness can be a little bit more terrifying. So she kind of starts getting a little bit in her own head that something's going to happen, even though there's nothing there. So she says, I'm home alone for the first time. I'm kind of freaked out. What's the best thing to do? Probably just go to bed, sleep the night through, quicker morning can come. My parents will come back home. Everything will be fine. So she heads up to her room, and she's pet sitting the dog, so the dog's with her. So she brings up the dog. Normally the dog will sleep downstairs, but tonight she's, a little bit terrified. She wants the dog to sleep next to her bed.
I don't like where this is going.
So as we do now, she gets into bed. She pulls out her phone, scrolls through a little bit of Reddit, a little bit of Twitter, and, she kind of forgets the entire news broadcast and just, eventually gets tired, drifts off to sleep. So around 3 a.m, she suddenly has that almost falling feeling when you're sleeping and wakes up. And when she does, she hears dead silence except for a slight dripping sound coming from the bathroom. So all of her hair stands on end instantly, and her heart starts racing as she stares into the darkness of the hallway. So what's she do? She slowly reaches down for the dog to try to reassure herself. As long as the dog's there, she's fine. Anytime someone has walked by her house, anytime someone's knocked on the door, her dog barks. So she says, if my dog's here, then I'm fine. So she reaches down and, her dog gives her a little lick on the hand to just kind of reassure her. And so it kind of brings a little bit of relief over. She's still a little bit freaked out.
Like he would have heard it, he would have heard
the
it.
dogs bark anytime someone's at the door. It's fine. So she's a little bit terrified, has to calm down a little bit, but after about 15 minutes, she manages to drift off to sleep. So she sleeps soundly through the night. Everything is all right, and wakes up in the morning and, eyes wide open, sunlight's filling the room, and she sits up and what do you know? Everything's fine, just like she thought. So she sits up, still hears that faint dripping sound coming from the bathroom. So she gets up, looks around, and the dog must have already gone downstairs to get something to eat.
Stop.
She wants to brush her teeth, get ready for the morning. So she says, I'm going to go check out that dripping sound in the bathroom. She walks down the hallway, opens the bathroom door. She sees her dog's corpse hanging from the shower with blood dripping down into the bath. Looks at the wall, and it says, humans can lick too.
Oh.
She calls the police. They investigate. She locked every window except her basement window.
Oh.
Supposedly, that's a true story.
I feel like they can't be real.
That's creepy as fuck.
I don't know. Could be. I will say I added in the Reddit and Twitter scrolling, but the story is back from around usually like the 1970s, 80s, whenever the serial killers were around too.
Every fucking...
That's why I said it's
Yeah,
creepy.
you're right. You're right.
But does that stuff still happen to this day? It does. Sleep soundly tonight, folks. That shadow in the corner might not be a shadow.
And what was that one called? What was like the... what was
The licked hand.
The licked hand. I do not like that.
Scary stories to tell in the dark.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go with my last one that I had, but I feel like you guys are upstaging me here. I just did some light research. I think it's tough because nobody has really great Yeti stories.
Yeah. But you wanted to touch on the Yeti.
Yeah, okay. They're classic. So
I have an interesting Yeti thing to add after Craig, after you get into it.
I keep getting more that keep
I have
coming in
a
my head
cool
now,
one.
too.
This one specifically relates to the Yeti specifically, though.
okay. Well, do you guys have any fond, specific, not memories of the Yeti, obviously, but like, what do you think of when you think Yeti?
It keeps my drinks cool.
Okay.
I mean,
He lives in the RTIC.
I like the Bigfoot. I think it's funny. I know it's like a craze now, like people have stuff in their yards and bumper stickers, and I think the Bigfoot's just cool because I don't see, now the Yeti's a little different, but the Bigfoot I see is just like a friendly little ape guy that's like walking around, and like if you ran into him in the woods, he would probably like just let you on your merry way or whatever, and you'd be like, whoa. And you'd get like the worst photo ever on your phone.
We're talking about the Yeti. Oh, no.
The Yeti.
Do you have the Bigfoot? I actually had a comment about Bigfoot, but
I do not have the Bigfoot,
Okay.
but the Yeti, I'm interested to see how its origins diverge from the Bigfoot, because at a certain point there just seems to be a lot of like Bigfoots running around. But the Yeti, when I think of him, I think of a terrifying, like giant white furred monster that's hunting like the Himalayas area, like these large mountains, and that if you're camping or you're trying to hike Everest, or you live in Nepal and so you live in this huge mountainous area, if you're camping, this thing might just come out of its cave and fucking eat you.
I've heard a lot of stories like that about the Yeti, where it's very experienced, like cold weather survivalists who go out on like a trip they've done many times before, and they're not heard from, and then suddenly people go out to research where they went, and they find their igloo or tent or whatever they're sleeping in, and they're just nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and it's like, did they disappear in the inclement weather? And it's also another thing, like the thick California woods, right, where Bigfoot supposedly gets seen a lot. How often are people just walking around the Himalayan mountains? Could there be some kind of creature that lives in a cave up there? I'm not saying there is, but I'm saying that to me is not out of the realm of possibility, that maybe there is something that lives there that we don't know exists. Like,
I do have a quick aside about Bigfoot. In my occupation, I do talk to a lot of crazy old people that are really into conspiracies, and
yes.
most of it is like anti-vax, like Trump won. It's like, oh my God. I did talk to one dude. He was cool as hell. He believed in the vaccine. I'm pretty sure he said that he was not a big Trump fan, but he was totally convinced that Bigfoot was real.
Yeah.
Like he would tell me like, yeah, I mean, I just think they're just smarter than us, and they know how to find us. And I would like egg him on and be like, so as soon as we figure out how to find them, that's when they know what the next step to take, so they're not caught. He's like, that's exactly it. And it's just funny. I'm like, why can't more old people believe conspiracy theories like that don't hurt anybody?
Like cool ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so I was like,
agree.
man, that sucks.
That's the thing. There are conspiracy theories that really make you miserable and drive you crazy. And then there's conspiracy theories that, like, if you were to ask me, like, Matt, do you believe in ghosts, or do you believe in like the Bigfoot or whatever? I guess I don't necessarily like know, but I will say it's a lot funner to believe that stuff exists. You know what I mean?
When are we doing the Xenu Pretty Good podcast, where we find an abandoned house and go in?
Stop it. I want to hear about the Yeti.
Yeah,
Please.
So, off that topic.
Yeah.
So the Yeti is also known as the Abominable Snowman, and does have Himalayan origins.
It's a much cuter name, by the way.
Yeah. So it's actually, I was wondering where that came from, and it's actually a mistranslation of the Himalayan name Man Bear Snowman. So some like newspaper guy was like, how about abominable? It does have a nice ring to it.
Yeah, because when I hear Abominable Snowman, I think of the Bumble from that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special, which, the Bumble's cool as hell, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's funny.
He's like iconic.
He puts the little star on the Christmas tree,
Yeah. Probably the most famous incarnation of the Yeti. So
Probably, yeah.
and it's usually depicted as a bipedal creature. So, with like kind of ape hands or whatever, and like claws and stuff like that. Now the haters are going to tell you that it is probably a bear. So back when maybe some Himalayans at some point, they didn't know that bears can walk on two legs. So you see this thing walking around clawing, and like, I think you could very easily mistake a bear for a Yeti.
Yeah, I can see
So
that.
that's what I think the comment.
By the way, Craig, that's what the Enfield Monster supposedly looked like, which looks similar to your fucking deer thing that you showed with the deer's cocked-eyed head there.
Yeah.
You need to send that to Lucas so you can
I
put
did.
it
I
in
got
like
it, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
But
there's so much
I did
stuff out there.
I did pull up Yeti Pictures. There he is. And of course the Bumble showed up too.
Well, we're gonna get touch on actually some of those pictures in
Oh,
a sense. So I want to touch on. So there's actually a very interesting 3-dimensional recreation of the Yeti, and it's at this place. I think it's like an amusement park, Walt Disney World. I think that it's like in Florida.
okay.
So I think that's like what it is. But one of their parks, they have a ride called Expedition Everest.
Okay.
And
Were you being sarcastic, Craig? Because it
yeah.
is at Disney.
Yeah.
Okay. I got
We're
you.
over here.
Yeah. I was like, if it was at Disney, Craig would know. And that was the joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have, I don't just mention this just to mention Disney, but so Expedition Everest, the story is like you go on it's a roller coaster and you go in this forbidden mountain that's being guarded by this Yeti. There's this like company is trying to build train tracks, like this anti-corporate message, and the Yeti's trying to take revenge by like fucking with you. So as part of the experience, there's obviously a Yeti character at the very end. And what's interesting is they used primatologists to try to recreate what the Yeti would have looked like. So they use a lot of researchers. So it's very interesting that like this is like an expert's opinion. Okay, if a creature was this size and like all these like had all these characteristics of a Yeti, that it would look like this. So I'll show you real quick, which is kind of interesting. I mean, it's kind of the classic Yeti, but
I could see the bear influences in it too.
yeah, like the claws especially. So this is like what the experts think it would
Well,
look
that's
like.
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty scary looking at
It is scary.
So-
Can you imagine it's nighttime and there's snowfall and you're in your little igloo and that fucking thing comes out? You're like, I'm fucked.
Yeah,
Yo, you
you're
wanna
in your
see something?
bedroom.
Like you're so cold. You're like, man, I got to take a piss. Like it's cold out. I don't want to have to do this. And then that thing comes walking out of the dark. You're like, oh,
You know
man,
how
I'm dead.
during like winter time we get snow here in Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
and you go outside and it's dead silent.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how terrifying being in like a mountain igloo camp tent by yourself, the dead silence that it would be at night?
Yeah.
Well, so I want to show you one last video. I promise this isn't just because it's a Disney video, but I think it shows the creepiness and the scariness. So this dude, he snuck into Animal Kingdom at night when everybody left.
Oh.
Because there's a lot of fascination with this Yeti figure because it's actually been broken for like years. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it. So it hasn't moved. So people have a lot of fascination, like what is it or whatever. So this dude, this urban explorer, broke in and went up the ride path to investigate this Yeti. It is so freaky. So let me fast forward. Like just watching this gets my fucking.
You'll have to like edit some of this footage into that.
Yeah.
I guess. So he breaks in and he's walking like up the tracks and
Yeah.
stuff.
Tell me that wouldn't freak you.
Oh my god.
And then he like, this dude is like nuts. He like climbs up. Here, I'll fast
What
forward.
the fuck?
Things I wouldn't be doing on my weekend.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is gonna be our next type of content.
Yeah, we're gonna be breaking into
Plus,
theme
imagine if
parks.
this thing just started fucking moving.
Oh my god.
You'd be dead.
I'm serious. We should go to like an
Be like-
abandoned house or something. I'm gonna do some research around
Yeah,
here.
this dude like starts like fucking touching it and stuff, and it's just so fucked up.
the next See New Games video where we go camping in the Himalayas.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's the Yeti. And yeah, it's another classic, and that's probably what you're seeing on the screen is what it would look like.
Interesting. I like It's terrifying. Are there any like famous Yeti stories that you saw in particular? Or?
No. I mean, I think it's just one of the classics where it's tough to find one definitive. Like, I think smaller stuff like that is a lot creepier because, like Enfield Monster, because one person saw it, very clear timeline. Versus Yeti, there's so many different things. Like, it's probably just like, I saw it.
Yeah, it's hard to distill where it even came from. And nowadays you hear about the Yeti as a kid, so it's like, I mean, even a 5-year-old could be like, I saw a Yeti out there. Or whatever. You see him in like, isn't there one in Monsters Inc. or whatever?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, when they get banished.
Yeah.
More Disney.
I did want to bring up in relation to the Yeti, not entirely, but there was a story that went around, and of course it's been debunked, like all of these have been debunked, right? But there was a story that went around at the beginning of the US invasion of Afghanistan, so it was in 2002, and supposedly there's this legend in Afghanistan called the Kandahar Giant. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. And keep in mind, land of the Middle East, Afghanistan, is not in that circle of where most of the Bible takes place in like Egypt and Syria and modern Israel and stuff like that. But there was that old legend about the Nephilim. And the Nephilim is supposedly like archangels mating with humans, and they created these giant babies. And supposedly Goliath was a Nephilim, right, in the Bible that David killed. So there's this story about the Kandahar Giant, and apparently he lives in the mountains of Afghanistan, right? And there's a million, obviously, in this Kandahar region. And there was a story that was released in 2002 about a special forces team encountering the Kandahar Giant, and that it had killed a few members of the team, and that they had sprayed it with bullets, and supposedly they had killed it, right? That they had killed the Kandahar Giant. And it's described as a 13-foot tall beast with flaming red hair and 6 fingers on each hand. And there was a famous fake photo that went around. And I had seen this photo a million times, and it drew me into like this story. Now it doesn't look very real here, but when I first saw this photo, it looked real as hell to me. I'll have to send you this photo, Lucas.
That's the dude from Game of Thrones.
Right, yeah. Well, this was before that. This story came out. So supposedly this was like a picture of the firefight, right? Like this is
It's not heroes.
the Kandahar Giant killing.
It's got a watermark. Matt was like,
I know.
Yeah, this is real as fuck.
Well, yeah.
Is Kate Upton going to advertise this to me?
So I thought the Kandahar Giant, he was a neat little thing. And, supposedly U.S. Special Forces reported bagging him. Here's an artist rendition of that. Like, we didn't just take down Al-Qaeda. We took out the Kandahar Giant, too. So, yeah. I just thought that was neat because Afghanistan's right there by the Himalayas as well. So,
Dude, what an amazing...
the Kandahar Giant, like a cousin of the Yeti who like lost the hair so he could live in the desert,
There's some type of metaphor that, the U.S. like invades Afghanistan. They encounter this fabled legend,
right?
That they've been searching for years and generations, and they fucking kill him.
They just light it up.
there's
I want to talk about that when we're done with all the stories, because there is something in American media that is like not just finding the cryptids, but guys going out with guns and killing the cryptids, right? Like there's a ton of Bigfoot shows and our favorite show, Mountain Monsters, that the sequel podcast to the Deadliest Warrior podcast. And obviously that's a goofball show, but in that show, everybody's got a gun. Like they're not just going in the woods to find the Stonish giant. They're going in the woods to capture and or kill the Stonish giant. And I always find that fascination really interesting. Like the assumption that these creatures are like out to get you or something like that. Like I'm not just going to find Bigfoot. When I find him, I'm going to empty a mag of 7.62 into his head. Like I'm just going to...
Some of the creatures are out to get you though.
Well, you know what I think is a really interesting take on that is I don't know. I don't remember. I saw a video of it, but in Red Dead Redemption, obviously that game is all about. It's like all Rockstar games are a big criticism of America most of the time.
Sure.
And that game is all about manifest destiny and stuff like that. And there's a special mission you can do. I think you have to do all. It's like a secret last end game thing. Because in San Andreas, players are always trying to find this Yeti, this Bigfoot that actually exists.
I remember that.
And so they put that as a kind of like acknowledging that you can find a real Yeti, and there's a little cutscene. And I'm pretty sure the Yeti is like super sad because he's like, you guys killed all of my people, and I'm the last one left.
Yeah.
So I think it's almost like it's like that where it's this desire for Americans, like, okay, this is untamed part of nature.
I've got to conquer the frontier.
Yeah,
right?
I got to kill this thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of speaking to that.
Well, to get off the Yeti and into one of my favorite guys, who I'll try to keep it spooky, but the Mothman of West Virginia, okay, probably my favorite cryptid of all time. When we were doing this episode, I called him immediately. I was like, I have to.
It's like the new school classic.
And the Mothman has gotten what I guess I'll refer to in pop culture terms as the Harley Quinn treatment, where Harley Quinn, famous girlfriend of the Joker, was a villain for decades and decades in the comic book universe. But everybody really likes Harley Quinn. It's kind of a Punisher thing too. Like everybody likes the Punisher. And so now every time you see Harley Quinn, she's never a villain. She's always like an anti-hero. Like she's a good guy kind of, right? She's working with Batman. Or even if Batman's stopping her, she's just kind of up to shenanigans fucking with other villains.
Evil,
right?
but taking down more evil.
Yeah, the Harley Quinn movie, the Suicide Squad movies, like I know she has that line where she's like, we're bad guys, that's what we do. But like people like Harley Quinn. I know why some people really like Harley Quinn. I'm not saying I'm part of that, but people think she's cool. And I think the Mothman has gotten that treatment over time. So the Mothman started as a very sinister, scary legend. And now the Mothman, we'll get into it, but he's sort of, people love him now. So he's like a good guy. Like people wear t-shirts with the Mothman on it and stuff. So who the fuck is the Mothman, you're wondering? So in West Virginia folklore, the Mothman is this famous creature from the Point Pleasant area. Now, Point Pleasant is a small town. It is like one road. It's like a strip of buildings, right? And he was reportedly seen in this area from November 15th, 1966 to December 15th, 1967. So like a year, basically. A year and a month. The first ever sighting of what became known as the Mothman happened on November 15th, 1966. There was two young couples from the Point Pleasant area, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and then Steve and Mary Mallet. What they were doing was Steve and Roger were drag racing on this long strip of rural country road. It's still there. You can go to that road and see. It's like a flat, clear road. There's just like woods next to it, basically. And they were drag racing with their girlfriends in the car. Now, Roger and Linda supposedly sighted this monster as they were going. They passed a creature that they described as having... it was a large gray creature with eyes that glowed red. That is like the signature Mothman thing. He's got glowing red eyes. He's like as tall as a human. He's like 6 feet tall, and he has wings. Now, he doesn't just have wings, but he can take off like vertically, like a helicopter, basically. So there's some sort of magic and fantasy going on with the Mothman, obviously. Like, because physiologically, if you have wings that are shaped like this, you can't vertically take off. Those are made for like your wings would need to be shaped like this. But he can take off vertically because he's the Mothman. So they described it when their car headlights hit it, the eyes glowed red and they blew past it. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings. That's the quote. However, this thing started following their car, and they could see it in the rear view mirror flying after them. And Roger claims that he got up to even 100 miles an hour on this strip of road, and this thing was still following them. Now, the one piece of physical evidence we do have is that they say that the Mothman started scratching up the roof of their car. Like, he got to the roof and they heard scratching noises. And the roof of their car was all messed up. It was all scratched up. Obviously, if you're skeptical about that, there's some obvious explanations, but
Convoluted insurance claim.
here's where the Mothman gets interesting.
I'm sorry, you did not purchase the Mothman coverage.
So this story gets out, and all of a sudden, this small town, everybody starts seeing the Mothman. Now, you might be wondering, Matt, what is interesting about this guy? Here's what's interesting. This area, this little town of Point Pleasant, there's an area outside of the town that is called TNT. It's referred to as TNT. And at TNT, the reason it's called that is during World War II, there was a munitions plant there where they built bombs. Oh, they aren't pies. They're bombs. They came from a bomb factory. And so this has led many to speculate that the Mothman is a product of this company dumped a ton of waste into the nearby rivers and lakes and stuff. And so people think that the Mothman might be some kind of mutation. There's so many origins of the Mothman, okay? His name comes because the Batman TV show was really popular at the time. And so one newspaper writer, they're the guys who got to stylize this and spice it up, coined the term Mothman, because Batman, he's the Mothman. He's a moth. So there's been a million sightings. Some people have cited, that the Mothman has taken their dog. But what really makes the Mothman interesting, there's a bridge that connects West Virginia to Ohio that's by this town. And I'm having trouble finding the exact date, but I'm sure it was like the 60s or the 70s. This town this bridge collapsed, and it killed like 40 people. There was a ton of cars on it. Collapsed into the river. And one of the most popular things that people said is that they spotted the Mothman there before the bridge collapsed. So Mothman has endured because this bridge collapse brought some national prominence to the Mothman sightings. There was a pretty popular book called The Mothman Prophecies that is not actually about Mothman all that much. It's mostly about UFO sightings. And it was made into a movie in 2002. So it's led to the modern theory that Mothman, it started off that he was a bad guy. Like the Mothman would steal your dog, or he would try to attack your car. And you mentioned the hearse earlier, Lucas, that shows up outside your house before you die.
Don't ever look out your window at night.
The popular current theory about Mothman is that he is and I picked the coolest quote I could find, a harbinger of death. That he is a warning, that he shows up to places before a terrible disaster is going to happen. And that's why he was at the bridge collapse. He was there right before it happened to warn people. And so ever since then, decades later, people still claim to see the Mothman at different things. People claim to see him in the smoke on 9/11. Some people claim he was caught on footage there. I know that sounds really funny.
One of the most recorded events of the.
Some people claim he is on footage there. Basically, any disaster that's happened since then, people have claimed to seen the Mothman there. Now, I don't necessarily believe the Mothman is real. I told you guys with the Enfield Monster, I believe that man did see something that was odd. And I'm very curious as to what he did see. I don't necessarily believe the Mothman's real. There's actually a pretty good explanation about the Mothman that like universities have come to. And a lot of people believe there are these, I want to find the specific type of bird. Okay. There is, sorry, that's from one of the stories. So there are these large cranes that are known to be in this West Virginia area. They have red markings along their face, like right where their eyes are, and the light of their eyes refracts red. And they have extremely large wingspans. They're very big creatures, and they have little claws, so they could definitely scratch up the top of your car. There's also a particular owl that lives in that area.
Who?
Right. There's a particular owl that lives in that area that has gigantic eyes that glow red in the dark. When like light is shined on it, it's creepy as fuck. And if you saw it at night, you would be terrified. A lot of people think that, a lot of skeptics who don't believe that the Mothman is like a real thing. There's theories that the Mothman is a combination of these cranes, these owls, of public hysteria. There's theories that the Mothman is a normal creature that was mutated by the radioactive waters from the waste being dumped there. And researchers did study the water. There was a lot of waste dumped into there. And of course, some people believe that the Mothman is a fantasy creature. He went from being like this predatorial figure to he's basically the town mascot now. So if you go to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, every year they have the Mothman Festival, and it is back on. It was closed during COVID, but it's back on now.
Aren't we going there for the first episode of Xenu Explorers?
We live in Pittsburgh. We are not far from Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
He probably came through here to go to 9/11.
They get over 1 million people that go to this festival every year, and they come from around the world because this bridge story made him national news. And, the movie and the book also made him national news too. So people come to Point Pleasant. They have a statue of the Mothman in the town square that they built and erected in the town. He's at the center of town, the Mothman statue. I want to Google him so you guys can see him. There is a Mothman museum. The statue is really funny. That's him.
It's like a Power Ranger.
Yeah.
Looks like it would fight Godzilla in like a 1950s movie.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to, is that he's made a face turn, to put it in wrestling terminology. He went from being a scary monster to being, he's a good guy that warns you when bad stuff is going to happen. And he's the town mascot. And he basically he is what the town's economy is built around. I watched a really cool PBS video where this lady, I've never seen the show before, but she basically like goes and studies these myths and animals, and I think she's coming at it from like a point of view that these things aren't real, but she's trying to find the origins of these myths. And she interviewed a ton of locals. She interviewed the guy that runs the museum. She interviewed the guy who helps the mayor and is in charge of all the tourism in town, who was around when all the Mothman stuff originally happened. And basically this town's economy has become revolved around the story of the Mothman and people visiting to try and see him. And I will say, she did walk through, and she had her camera crew and everything, and they walked. You can go to, you can't necessarily go inside the factories, but you can go into some of these tunnels where the old munitions buildings were, and there's graffiti all over the walls because people go and explore it all the time. The woods are very creepy there. Creepy woods, rundown abandoned buildings, swamplands. You can see how somebody might if you see a glowing pair of red eyes and you've heard about the Mothman, how you might call the police.
There he is.
Yeah. So I don't know. There is a wonderful, last thing I'll say is there's a wonderful episode of Mountain Monsters, which we talked about earlier, where they're trying to catch the Mothman and they describe him as an elemental. And they try to catch him they set up a trap where they're like, we have all 6 elements of nature. And it's literally, they have like a podium with like a bowl of water, a little fire going like a candle, a mound of dirt. I don't know. I forget what they used for air. And then they also include plant and animal. And they have like a dead rabbit and like a bunch of plants sitting on one stump. And they're like, this will summon the Mothman. And there's a legendary moment of that show, arguably the most memorable moment of that show, where Buck, the rookie character, he's the guy that's always got like the do-rag on. There's a legendary moment where in the show they're hunting for the Mothman and he looks over his shoulder. And of course it's at night, so all the footage is in black and white. And you see 2 pair of eyes light up. And Buck just goes down. He goes, hits the deck. The eyes disappear. They run over and he goes, I don't know. I saw the eyes and I was mesmerized. It was like he was talking to me and warning me to stay away. So the Mothman, I kind of wanted to do this dichotomy between the Enfield Monster, which is like this niche week-long thing, and the Mothman, who started as a story and has evolved into like a pop culture figure. Basically, you go to that town, there's whole stores dedicated to, you buy the Mothman t-shirt, right? It's just very interesting how cryptids become like that. He's like an icon of this little small town. This brings in tourists. This makes them money. So I just thought he was really not just a fascinating cryptid story, but even more so a fascinating, because some people think he's an alien, of course, which I want to get to after you tell your last story, Lucas. There's a couple things we kind of touched on, hunting the monsters with guns. I think there's an interesting thing to talk about UFOs and aliens in general, because almost every cryptid, there's a crowd of people that are like, it's an alien.
I want to talk about real experiences at the end too.
I'd like that. That would be cool. I saw the Mothman. Okay, I'm kidding. But when I go to West Virginia someday, I do want to visit this Mothman. It is on my bucket list. I want to go. It's probably like a 2-hour drive from where we're at, probably.
Yeah,
maybe not
get
even.
there in an hour.
Hour and a half. It's an hour and a half to Weirton. I don't know where Point Pleasant is in relation to Weirton. But anyways, we can stop at DJ's, which is that rib joint that the penguins always stop at when they travel. It's a good place. Shout out DJ's. But that's all I have for you on the Mothman. So love him. I'll send you a picture of the Mothman statue so you can put him in the video.
Put it up.
Yeah.
West Virginia, that's pretty close, right? Well, somewhere far away.
The other side of the earth, China.
Exactly. You want to hear
Manchuria.
You want to hear a true story? So, everyone knows I was part of the Marine Corps, right? And we get stationed in Japan. So we had some buddies that got sent over to Japan, and they came back with what is presumably a true story. So, would you guys want to go to Japan someday?
I think it would be cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
You go out, hit up like a big place like Tokyo, somewhere big, experience some Japanese culture. Go out to a nightclub, go out to a bar. You stay out.
I want to get some local cuisine.
Oh, I bet it's some fantastic.
Yeah.
You go out.
You're queuing me up to scare me.
I thought you were going to say some local coochie.
I'm a married man, sir.
You get some local, whatever you're into. You go to a bar, something notable about like Tokyo and stuff. The streets are pretty crowded.
You stay out a little bit late, 2 a.m. The streets start clearing out a little bit, right? So you decide, you got an Airbnb, so you want to walk home. You're walking down some of the busy, crowded streets, and then maybe you stayed out a little bit too late tonight, and you remember that you have to cut across maybe some not as
lit up streets for the way home. You know, you're looking around, the crowds are starting to thin a little bit, and then you make that turn onto the street with nobody else on it. It's just you. There's maybe a couple lights down the way, and you get that little bit of a tingle in your neck. You're walking along, and just up ahead, you think you see is that looks like a young lady just walking. She has, typically in Japan, sometimes they wear a mask over their face because
Unlike America.
they wear a mask over their face. So you walk up to her, and she seems pretty shy at first, and she has real dark black hair that's a little bit obscuring her face, and you expect kind of just to walk right past her, but she kind of stops as you're approaching her, and she turns towards you. She asks you, "Am I beautiful?" What would you say?
Just by, if I didn't ignore her, if I was in the mood to answer, I mean, I would just say like, yeah, sure.
You tell her, yeah.
Just by default, yeah.
She reaches behind her head, unties the mask. When she pulls it down, her mouth is cut ear to ear, and her unhinged jaw hangs down. And she asks you, "How about now?" What do you say?
I'd run. I'd be taken off.
It's too late. You were just killed by Kuchisani Onna.
Oh my God.
I believe there's literally
Kuchisaki Onna.
there's literally a Junji Ito story that's I think just that.
Yeah,
Probably
it is
several.
the most popular story in Japan, one of their big urban legends. It is the wife of a feudal samurai whose name was Kuchisaki Onna, and she was apparently, sleeping around a little bit. So the samurai held her down one night and cut her mouth ear to ear.
Like the Joker, his dad.
Yeah, and it unhinged her jaw. She ran off into the woods, never to be seen again. So there's a rumor that if you walk the streets of Tokyo, some of the big cities in Japan, you have a chance to come across Kuchisaki Onna, and she will ask you if she's beautiful. And at that point, your fate is sealed.
I was about to say, what if I said no?
She is an omen of death. If you say no, she will kill you.
Would you say she is a harbinger of death?
There are two supposed ways to try to beat her. Apparently, she likes sweets. So if you throw some candy at her, and the second method is technically if you throw money at her. Supposedly that should give you enough time, but she does have superhuman speed. Now, she noticeably carries a large pair of scissors underneath her dress, which is what she will drive through your heart if you answer her questions wrong or right.
Oh my God.
That is Kuchisaki Onna. But that is my little short story here I wanted to cover. Did you guys ever hear the Russian sleep experiment?
No.
I have.
Because I really wanted to cover that tonight.
Sounds like a ska band.
So, during
You
the
guys are getting some freebies tonight. Okay, yeah, we were promised. We promised you like 3, 2, and 2, and
I
you're
honestly
getting
remembered
Kandahar
this.
Giant and the Russian sleep experiment.
So during the 1940s, during the Soviet era, a certain group of Soviet scientists set out to find the results of what would happen if they kept people awake for 30 days. It was during this period that they believed they had created a stimulant capable of keeping a soldier sleepless for a long time. That's because every nation, such as Germany, US, and England, were looking for ways to win World War II. So we're in that era. And the Russian sleep experiment was their strategic
Can I
weapon.
just interject and say that they actually did? It's meth.
Yeah.
They put meth in chocolates and gave it to soldiers of different nations to keep them up.
Supposedly the Russian sleep experiment, what I'm about to tell you is the urban legend story, but supposedly it is ingrained in some truth. Before rendering it safe, they decided to test it on some human subjects. Since it was during the World War, finding test subjects wasn't a hassle, as there was plenty of war prisoners. Researchers designed a scientific experiment to run for 15 days. They had a gas chamber essentially set up that they locked these prisoners of wars in. Then they would release the stimulant through some piping in the ceiling.
They call it a crack pipe.
So these people were locked in this room and they had everything they
Was the meth blue? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did the Better Call Saul thing just happened, so there's a ton of Breaking Bad memes on Twitter right now. So I'm sorry. I didn't
So
mean.
Okay.
these prisoners of wars had everything they required, like running water, a toilet, and a bed. They continually administered this stimulant gas to the test subjects to make them stay awake. At the same time, they would monitor if the oxygen levels were fine. For the first 3 days, everything seemed okay, and the gas was doing its job as expected. However, things took a darker turn on the 4th day, as the prisoners started speaking of horrors they witnessed at war, among other increasingly traumatic incidents. On the 5th day, things became much worse when the prisoners fell into psychosis. Apart from talking to themselves, they started seeing things that weren't there. Also, they became paranoid about their fellow prisoners and would often whisper on the microphones in the chamber without the other test subjects. On the 9th day, 2 prisoners started screaming while running around. The screams were so loud they almost broke their vocal cords. Suddenly, out of the blue, there was instant silence, no screaming. Even then, the other test subjects started talking. The researchers had their worst fear of what might be happening in the chamber. Though there was an eerie silence that befell once again, the scientists could still hear one of the prisoners saying, "We don't want to be free." It was on the 15th day the researchers decided to open the chamber, only to meet a horrific result. One of the prisoners was dead. The dead prisoner was severely mutilated, just like the other 4 surviving test subjects. The dead one's abdomen was ripped open and the flesh torn off. You might be wondering what happened to the 4 surviving test subjects. Apparently, all 5 test subjects had eaten their own flesh. Every surviving test subject refused to leave the chamber. Surprisingly, they fought with extreme strength compared to when they had walked into the chamber, despite their self-inflicted wounds. Moreover, they were so aggressive when fighting back that they tore their muscles from their bones while resisting removal from the chamber. Seemed as they had superhuman powers. When asked why they had self-inflicted their wounds, each test subject responded, "I must stay awake." After being removed from the chambers, the surviving test subjects still showed evidence of extreme strength regardless of their lethal injuries, and were desperate desire to remain awake. Their sheer determination to remain alive. Also, they had unimaginable resistance to sedatives with a desperate desire for the gas. One of the things the researchers discovered is that the subjects instantly died when they fell asleep. By now, 2 out of the 5 were dead. The remaining 3 were being treated for their injuries in preparation for returning to the chamber. However, a shocking discovery by an EEG monitor showed that each test subject was brain dead. Seemed pretty apparent that the gas was the weapon the Soviet Union developed, could mess with the human mind. One of the 3 prisoners fell asleep and died instantly, just before the chamber was sealed. The lead Russian sleep experiment researcher shot the other prisoner. Before the researcher shot the last surviving test subject, he asked him who he was. In response, the prisoner said, "I'm the evil, kept in check by sleep. I reside in every human mind." And with that, he shot him dead and went on to cover up the traces of the entire Soviet sleep experiment.
Wow. I will say, it is scientific fact that if you are sleep deprived, so we could get on a whole tangent about what are dreams, right? Or why do they exist? But the chemical in your brain, I don't know all the terminology, but I remember reading about this. The chemical in your brain that causes you to create dreams while you're asleep, if you stay awake, if you force yourself to stay awake, because this has been mainly reported by soldiers in the field who, if they're on the run from an enemy or if they have to stay awake for a period of time and they can't go to sleep, those chemicals that make you dream will start activating involuntarily and you will hallucinate. They cause you to hallucinate things. So like how your dreams are just hallucinations, but you're asleep and you're unconscious. This is a waking dream. Basically, you will start to see things. So
after 15 days,
I can't imagine your brain might be, you're so exhausted, obviously, your cognitive function is down. And I mean, you can't even imagine how tired you would be after like 15 days. But all your brain juices are making you see things, and you could definitely, think of some of the horrifying things you've seen in your dreams or nightmares, and imagine if
that becoming your life.
It's right in front of you and you can't escape it and you can't wake up. Like,
Is the brain susceptible to creating madmen? And it is sleep and the release of those chemicals in proper proportion that keeps people sane.
sure. Why do we sleep? Why do creatures sleep? Right? Why do we dream? What's the evolutionary benefit to that? People don't really always know. I don't know if it's to keep the cognitive evil of man at bay necessarily, but it is interesting to think about why do things work that way necessarily. And the shit about a guy turning evil, like, is that somebody hallucinating and saying that stuff? Like, what would, obviously that's not like,
Somebody on meth might say that.
could be, yeah, right. But that's what I mean. Like, if you're going crazy, like,
I mean, if they're ripping their own flesh off and screaming so loud that they almost
yeah,
rip out their vocal cords, that would be some pretty extreme experiences.
also interesting to think about. This is like less in the realm of horror or legend, but if you ever get, which I have been a couple times, drunk enough that you don't remember what you did, you have a blackout. Stop it. What, like, you don't remember it. What is like running your body? It's almost like your body's on autopilot. So what's happening if you're being kept awake by these external drugs that are keeping your heart going and keeping your brain buzzing, but your like cognitive function is not there and your body is just running on autopilot, and it really starts to question, what are you, right? Like, what is the self? If you don't have conscientious choice, or if you're just, your brain is running involuntarily, what is that? Right? Like, what is that part of you?
Have you guys ever
So
stayed up
weird.
for like, I know I've been close to 3 days before. It was my longest stint. And I have like, you start to lose short-term memory at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Why'd you stay up for 3 days?
It was military.
I was about to say it was
stuff.
probably in the military.
Training exercises.
To stay up for 3 days?
Yeah, just out in the field. And it might have been, I might have taken a nap or two in there. It wasn't probably like 3 days
Oh.
straight. But it was, minimal sleep, we'll say, for
Yeah.
3 days. And where you still probably feel most of the effects.
It wasn't enough because sleep specialists will tell you need at a minimum like 6 hours a day,
Yeah,
or
we'll
else
say,
you
like,
start to
max.
lose cognitive function. Like,
We'll
the
say
next
like
day.
max, I was getting 1,
Yeah.
maybe 2 if I was lucky at that point. So I was feeling, maybe not the straight effects, but I distinctly, remember now, but remember now saying as in like I have blank spots about that where like I lost like some short-term memory, and it felt like you were in a dream instead of being awake.
Mm-hmm.
And sleep is a underappreciated, or perhaps
Probably the closest I ever came to staying. I don't think I made it to 48 hours, but I feel like, and it was that trip we took for senior year, where we decided the dumbest idea in the world, where we were like, we're going to stay up all night and then we're going to stay up all next night. And I did not make it a full 48 hours. But I was over 24. I was between 24 and 48, and it sucked. I mean, I was 18, so I was kind of in the prime of like, you can do dumb stuff to your body and your body doesn't really care. But like, as soon as I laid down in bed and relaxed, like I was out. But I guess nowadays, like if I maybe get like 2 hours of sleep or something, I have to get up early, because I'm stressed out the night before and I don't get a lot of sleep. Like, I've never really had hallucinations that I can really think of,
I don't
but
think I ever had either.
you definitely slow down. You're like, God damn it, I want to go to sleep. Like, it's all you want to do.
Well, I think this all kind of points to where these cryptids come from, but it's sort of a nice end cap, this whole conversation. So I just want to ask, does anyone have any other cryptids they wanted to bring up? Or
No, not specifically.
well, so I think I'm going to bring up something that might seem out of left field, but stay with me. I think it speaks to what's going on with cryptids and everything. So several years ago, the Cleveland Browns defensive end, Myles Garrett, attacked Mason Rudolph, quarterback for the Steelers, with a helmet.
Okay.
Now, Myles Garrett alleges that he heard a racial slur come out of Mason's mouth. That's why he went ballistic.
Mm-hmm.
And Myles Garrett is somebody who is known, despite looking like an absolute monster and a cryptid himself, he is very mild-mannered, calm, rational, smart. And so this is really out of character for him. And I was listening to, I think it was Shannon Sharp talk about it, and he said that I have no doubt that Myles Garrett heard him say a racial slur, but I don't think that Mason actually said that, because it would be, of course, logically it'd be very dumb, to do that in the middle of a football field. It didn't seem likely. And getting back to cryptids, I think that that's just a weakness of the human mind, the human condition is, people will say, like, I'm a very skeptical person. People will tell me, I've seen ghosts, I've seen this. But the human mind is so powerful that you could 100% believe that you saw some type of cryptid right in front of you. And that's why evidence is so important, because, you need that. Or else it could be a trick on your mind. Now,
I have proof of that. I just want to throw in real quick. If you want to try this for yourself to test the power of the human mind, me and our buddy RJ used to do this when we were kids. Go into a dark room with a partner and get it so the light is just so you can barely see each other's faces. Look at each other's face and picture a monster, and their face will morph into that monster.
Yeah.
That is a real, you can try that yourself and it will freak you out.
Yeah. Now, obviously that could be kind of a weakness or perceived weakness, is like all human minds are real susceptible. But I'd argue it's actually something that's kind of beautiful. If you look at the Mothman example, like the idea of this one small story creating this mass hysteria, uniting people, like, hell yeah, I saw that Mothman, like wanting to, support almost this person that saw this. Now they start seeing it, and it's like this unifying thing. And you have like a town that gathers around this cryptid. And I think that that's probably the best way to look at this whole thing about why cryptids are so popular, is it's this very unique human thing that people want to participate and almost support each other. And
because you want to see something that hasn't been seen. You want to see an alien, right? You want to see, and at a certain level, it's funner to think that we don't have it all figured out, that we don't have all the answers, because facts, we have not cataloged every animal on the planet. Like, especially deep in the ocean and stuff, we don't know everything that's down there.
Yeah, it's something like we know like 3% of what's down there.
Yeah. We don't know. And as far as the scope and the rest of the galaxy, you bring up aliens and stuff, and it's like, I have absolutely no doubt. Think of how big the universe is, and think of how much time has existed. There might not be any aliens around right now. They might have existed 2 million years ago, and it lived for think of the dinosaurs.
Well, look at the stars too. The light you're seeing from the stars is from 65
the dinosaurs
million years ago.
lived on this planet for how many years, how many cycles, and they're all gone. Like, the only evidence we have is that we dig them up out of the ground. So, I don't know. You're right, Craig. I think Craig's bringing up an interesting, community aspect, because one of the evolutionary explanations for why your mind will create images of what you're looking for is that it's trying to it's your quick response. It's the idea that if you can look at something and identify it really quickly as a friend or a foe, it's why you don't like stuff that has predatorial features, and it's why naturally humans gather toward people that look more like them than people that don't. It's trying to spot friend or foe as quick as possible, because those milliseconds in nature might be the difference between you touching the snake and getting bit, or you being like, I'm not touching that, right? And I also go back to dreams. If we have the ability to hallucinate these extravagant sort of worlds
every night
in our mind,
multiples sometimes,
a night, then if I have the ability to hook up with Taylor Swift in a dream, then you have the ability to form that in your imagination or to see it. And I'm not discounting any of this stuff. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know for sure. But at the end of the day, it is probably more likely that people just mistakenly see things and then it spins into a legend. And once people are looking for the Mothman, they see the Mothman everywhere, right?
Speaking of dreams, did you ever hear the theory that every face you see in your dreams is someone you've seen in real life?
Yeah.
Your brain is incapable of creating a new face for your dreams. Isn't that insane?
That is crazy because it does make sense a little bit. But at the same time, it's like pulling from your unconscious memory because there's definitely faces I see in my dreams that I don't recognize.
Well,
that person.
according to that theory, you can be 4 years old, see a face passing by at like Walmart, and then they'll appear in your dream 20 years later with you have no memory of who this
It doesn't
person
even
is.
need to reach back that far. Like I went to, shout out Sheetz, Western PA. I went to Sheetz yesterday to get some dinner, because neither of us wanted to cook and it was real late. So you go to Sheetz. I saw, like 30 people in there. I don't remember what any of them really looked like. I couldn't really tell you. But if that's still like seared into my brain after 24 hours and I have a dream, my brain could probably pull that shit out and stick that face on somebody.
Or like,
right?
because I think your brain remembers every single moment of your life. You can only recall a certain amount of it. At least that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Which I guess what's the difference then?
That's kind
you
of
can't recall it.
Yeah.
but-
It's kind of
Seeing
wild.
people at Sheets, another thing I remember reading at one point, on average, you like walk by 7 murderers in your life,
Yeah.
and they just chose not to kill you.
They chose not to kill you. That's pretty wild. Now you're freaking me out, dude. That is wild to think about. Think of all the people you've walked past that have done like crazy shit and you just didn't even know that person was.
What if
right
they
there.
have like that secret life that they just haven't been caught for? Yet?
You straight up I'm going to go to the most funny I'm going to go to the most funny and extreme example. Like what if when you were a kid, like you walked past or your parents walked past like Osama bin Laden at the mall? They didn't even know. They're just
He was
like
working for the CIA.
right. Right. That's why he's like a really funny example because he's super specific. But think of something like that. Like you walked past that person at that particular time and you'd never know.
Well, there was tons of people that knew like Ted Bundy and stuff and said, he was the nicest guy and they would see him regularly.
Yeah, sure.
And then, he had that secret life, but, he just chose not to.
I actually got a story similar.
That brings up the darkness that is in all humans, right? We all sort of have a double life, a darker side to us, but we're not all Ted Bundy.
No.
I've done,
Mine's like, I'm going to have some Cheez-Its at 2 a.m.
or I'm like, man, I really wish I hadn't looked up those pictures of Ahsoka, from Star Wars.
I got a
Like,
question.
that was weird.
Well, I have a story about like walking past somebody
Age
and knowing
appropriate
somebody
Ahsoka.
that's similar to that.
Let's be clear. I want that on record.
You probably know this story. I don't know if you guys know, but so Alexis worked with this dude. He was considered like one of her close work friends. Like they hung out a bunch outside of work, and like we had this dude over for Thanksgiving. Like, and I knew him pretty well, and he he lived in West Virginia, but he worked in Pittsburgh.
He was the Mothman in a suit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
First I started to ruin the story, I was like, I'm setting it up.
Sorry.
But he commuted, which is kind of far to go to West Virginia to see Pittsburgh, but whatever. And one day he just stopped showing up, and like he wasn't answering anybody, and people were like, "What the hell's going on?" And so she Googled his name. And I was in the room with him. And meanwhile, I just hung out with this dude maybe about a week ago.
You were in the room with him.
Well, no. So I was
Okay. The way you said it, you said she Googled his name and you were like in the room with him.
Oh,
This is
no.
This is like a movie setup.
Sorry.
Craig, get out of there.
These maniacs in the no.
Yeah.
So he I was in a room with her when she found this out.
Okay.
And I just hung out with this dude like maybe about a week ago, and he was talking about his small business he was going to run, all the plans he had or whatever, and because he had quit that job, and it turns out he was arrested for molesting a bunch of kids. He was a teacher. And
wow.
And she was on trial. She was like, and I was like, oh my God. And it was so freaky. Like this, I broke bread with this dude at Thanksgiving. And it was unbelievable because I saw him in the court. Like you think of like court footage. You don't expect anybody you know to be in that courtroom. And it was like the most horrible shit. Like I read the police report. It was so fucked up. Apparently his mom was texting a bunch of his friends like, yeah, a bunch of kids just started making up lies about him for some reason. And he's going to do a plea deal because he can't prove that he didn't do it. And this plea deal, I think, was for like 30, 50 years. I'm like, yeah, that's a hell of a plea deal to get 50 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
I think if they're all making it up, you would be like, I'm not doing 50 years.
It's crazy how like parents defend their children even
Isn't
when
it?
they're like
that's why I don't even know.
murderers
I can't tell if she truly believes that or just trying to cover for him. If she's just trying to cover for him, that's so fucked up.
It's like an instinct, or like you said, Craig, like the Shannon Sharp, Miles Garrett thing.
Yeah.
The mom, she probably knows on like a subconscious level that her son is guilty, but it's like she is manifesting in her mind. She's willing to compromise and rationalize away all this stuff and be like, you know what? Like, because she loves her son so much. She
you
cares
see,
about her
like
son
you
so
raise
much.
this child up and you see
Yeah.
like their innocence when they're a child, and like probably, you know, I'm not a parent or anything, but probably in your mind it's really hard to grasp the fact that small child grew up to do something like
there's
horrible.
certain things that your emotions like can't grapple with, and it's like, no, my son didn't do that. These people are all lying, right?
Yeah.
And you look at it from the outside and it's close the book, clean cut, like, well, that guy's obviously guilty. There's like 30 children. But you know, if you know that person and you love them, you will like make up.
Even not as a
mind.
parent, but as a friend, not that either one of us were actively defending him, but it was like two different people. Because this was a dude that was talking about his life 6 months from now, and you know, gave no indication about this trial. Then all of a sudden he's arrested. Like he knew he was going to, like he wasn't like I think he like got out and was on bail or something, and then had to go back to jail. It was weird, but he knew this was going to happen, and he fabricated his life, and it was like, so you think you know a guy, like
People are
perhaps
crazy.
the true cryptids are all of us. Lucas, do you want to take us out?
Yeah. On that note, I want to propose that we continue this.
I think
future date.
I think we should too.
That we whether it's another pretty good or we do an
Halloween
urban legend.
special.
Yeah. I want to do one before that. I want to do it like next week. Look forward to next time. Maybe we'll cover some real life experiences because we probably each got a couple stories for that. Maybe some supernatural, maybe some weird things we've encountered ourselves.
You know, it's a pretty creepy podcast.
Yeah, the pretty creepy podcast.
I think I have one really cool, creepy one that I've never really shared with anybody, and I think it would be interesting.
I have 3. I wrote them down because I debated doing it on this episode, but we're going to leave everyone on a cliffhanger for next time.
Yep.
So we got a couple stories. We'd like to thank you for joining us on the Pretty Creepy Podcast.
All right, guys.
Shut off the light. Just
Sleep tight.
We'll see you next time.